Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on The Breakfast Show, and it's time to take a look at our first segment. As we said earlier, we're going to be talking about the future of the car manufacturing industry here in Egypt, how we can boost this industry. Possibly, is it possible, rather, to make a 100% Egyptian-made car? How can we use other countries, neighboring countries, as a model to be able to improve this sector? Instead of importing millions and millions of cars from around the world, how can we possibly take an agency and sort of or a brand and start to manufacture it here or reproduce it here? We're going to be talking about this industry in a more in-depth view with our guest. We're very delighted to have with us in the studio Mr. Mohamed Sheta. He's a car manufacturing expert and automotive expert, if I believe. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
just as Yasmin was talking right now, talking about our neighbors, like we have in Algeria, in Morocco, many developments took place in this respect. But how far it is important right now to Egypt to revive this manufacturing right now?
Actually, we should have been aware about the situation with our neighbors years ago. The problem is we don't have a vision. We never had a vision in terms of automotive industry. What we have so far here is, by the way, it's not an automotive manufacturing industry, it's an automotive assembling industry, which is even less sophisticated and less in-depth, which means you don't really have a supplying chain, for example. You don't have so many supplying companies providing all the components of the cars from scratch, because we are importing actually lots of these components from abroad. The problem is that all these 17 assembly lines which we have in Egypt, which have been operating over the past 2 or 3 decades, they never had a plan to export cars anyway. So this is why our market is one of the smallest markets worldwide, although we have now like 95 million Egyptians living in this country. And at the same time, I think the real numbers would be around 20 to 30,000 cars assembled in Egypt, and like another 30 or 40,000 imported, they call it CBU, completely built up cars, and imported from abroad, and the locally assembled ones are called CKD cars, completely knocked down. The problem is that all these companies which are operating in Egypt never had a vision or the intention to export. They were relying on the very high customs which are implemented on the cars imported from abroad, and this is why they used to have huge, actually they still have huge profit margins here in Egypt. And this is why, for example, you find a certain German car sold here in Egypt is twice as expensive as the same car sold in Germany, built by German laborers with the German labor costs. So
yeah, but that because I've imported cars a couple of times, and it was very difficult because the customs here and the regulations for importing cars in Egypt is very difficult. And for instance, it's on different categories. You have the CC of 1.6 is at a certain price. If you go up to 1.8, you're into another category. Yes. And it was very complicated. But during the corruption era, during the past 30 years in Egypt, there was a lot of people and companies and businessmen who were benefiting from importing a humongous number of cars rather than focusing more on renovating the old industries, because Egypt was the first Arab country to actually have a 100% Egyptian car. Now that is supposed to be changing because the market is changing and the price range. I mean, even those 17 assembled cars in Egypt that you're talking about have been working here for decades. They have contributed greatly to the decrease of the price of the car in comparison to importing a car, for instance, from
no,
Malaysia.
Actually, they haven't really helped in decreasing the prices. On the contrary, actually, if you buy a locally assembled car here in Egypt and you compare it with a car in Germany, for example, you will find the car costing here around, let's say we go for the top-notch car here sold in Egypt. It's a German car manufacturer from Stuttgart, for example. He sells his car for 1.4 million Egyptian pounds. The same car you can get in Germany with the same options assembled in Sindelfingen in Stuttgart for around 80,000 euros, which would be around 700,000. So it's actually double the price. And the same is also in the lower segments. For example, the the Korean cars, which used to be assembled here in Egypt, which costed around 80,000 pounds, which would at that time be around $15,000. You could get this car abroad for around $7,000 or $8,000. So actually, the problem is the only persons who benefited from the local assembly, from the local automotive assembly industry, were the investors and the owners of these car factories themselves. Neither the government benefited from it, because the engines they use are old generation engines, creating lots of emissions, which at the end of the day creates lots of pollution in Egypt as well. So all these cars lack lots of active and passive safety features, which resulted in Egypt being the #1 country in numbers of fatalities and road crashes. So we have a really big issue and a big problem in the automotive sector, and I just heard what President Sisi said a couple of days and weeks ago, that he wanted to re-establish an automotive industry and create a new Nasr company. I think the fact that none of these existing car assembly factories were interested in renewing the Nasr brand shows that it's very difficult to build a 100% Egyptian car. It's extremely difficult,
So
actually.
right
It's not reasonable if we compare it to the industry.
What is the main challenge? Because just I saw this as well. I saw also the people working in the factory, and they were very much, enthusiastic. They are looking forward for working, whatever. But if you want to start on good basis, definitely you need to make something new. To start from scratch.
We're not gonna invent the wheel from here in Egypt. I mean, we have to see how the industry is working. Over the past 20 or 30 years, all the car companies started to merge with each other, because it is a well-known rule among the car experts that in order to be a successful company, you need to produce at least 5 million cars. If you produce less than 5 million cars, you will not be able to compete with the big brands, with the big Asian brands, the American brands, the German brands. In order to build a car, we need to export this car, because our Egyptian market would not be able to take more than, let's say, 200,000 cars or 300,000 cars a year. So where do you go with where do we sell the rest of the cars? So the problem is, I just heard that there was a French delegation, for example, which met with Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahleb for becoming the new partner for this Egyptian car. I think these are fairy tales being told by these investors, by these foreign investors. I don't know who they are. They didn't even mention the names and the car companies. I think it was a big mistake not taking other nations into consideration, because, I mean, in France...
You're talking about brand names.
Yes, of course, because there's no way. I mean, I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I'm realistic. We cannot build a new name. Actually, brands are disappearing. Already existing brands, like, I mean, there are a few brands, American brands, which,
yeah. But I mean, in rebuilding an economy in Egypt at this current state, do you think that it is very necessary to consider as a priority on whether you want to go international, or if you want to be competing with other brands, or is it producing a 100% Egyptian car at a very affordable price that will be able to ease people's lives? Because, as you said, if you want to buy a car, you can't afford buying a car less than 80,000 pounds. And I'm sure that almost every single person who is driving a car in Egypt is installing it through a bank because they can't afford paying the cash.
Yes, but like I said, we don't have to invent the wheel. I mean, there are already Indian cars.
Exactly.
Very cheap Indian cars,
and they're only sold inside China and India.
Actually, you can import them if you want to. I mean, in Morocco, for example, you can buy one of the very popular French cars for around $5,000. $5,000, we're talking, this is like 40,000 Egyptian pounds. Why don't we produce the same car in Egypt? In order to develop one car, just to give you some numbers, in order to develop one car, you need at least 5 to 7 years to develop one car. All the R&D cost, research and development costs would be between $5 to $7 billion. So we don't have the R&D facilities in Egypt. We do not have the suppliers for the components in Egypt. We do not have the money to spend in creating a new car or developing a new car. So, I mean, why do we make it so difficult? I mean, they said there's a French delegation. I mean, there are only three French companies, which we know. One of them is already very active in Algeria and in Morocco. They already have a factory there producing 400,000 cars a year, and most of them are going for export. So and the other French company, which I mean, I don't know if this French company, which already have a factory in Morocco and Algeria, would be willing to come to Egypt again to build up a third factory. I think this is rather unlikely. And the other car company already has big issues and big financial problems, and is going to be taken over by a Chinese company.
Yes.
So I think we are discussing a potential Egyptian dream with the wrong partner. I think the Egyptian government should have gone to for example, to the German car manufacturers. There's one car manufacturer from Wolfsburg, for example. He has already almost 10 brands within its group. And
yes, that is it. That's what I want to talk about, the idea of the rebranding and making a new product under the umbrella of the main brand. This is something it can help.
Actually, this is the only way
yes.
we could revive the Egyptian automotive industry from tomorrow, because you need an existing brand.
It has happened in a couple of brands.
Sorry?
It has happened in a couple of brands where you only see them.
All the brands we have in Egypt, none of them are exporting any cars. They're just producing, they're assembling like 1,000 cars with a huge profit margin, in some cases reaching 150%.
Going to the investor himself.
Of course, and the investor takes this money and he invests this money in other companies outside Egypt, you know. So the only person who is not benefiting from this is the Egyptian government and the Egyptians themselves, because they pay a huge amount of money for cars with no active and passive safety features at all, and polluting the air in our
country. And they assume that
country.
it's much more cheaper when it's not compared to.
Sorry?
And they assume that they're buying it as a much more cheaper
price.
price.
Most of them know that because many people travel abroad and they see the prices of the cars abroad, you know. I mean, we have
the internet, of course, and all of us know about the prices, and you know.
Yeah, but there's nothing you can do about it, because when I got my car, it cost a lot here in Egypt. I got it from an Arab country, and when I imported it, they did not allow me to enter from Suez until I paid like almost double the price of the car. Oh. They had like a long list where they would calculate each and every part of my car, and adding up all the dollars together, each option. And really, at the end, I thought I would buy it much more cheaper if I got it from here.
There's lots of corruption.
It faced problems, and nobody knew how to fix it here.
Yeah.
And then I had to sell it at the end.
This is also part of the corruption we have in Egypt, because, for example, if you import a car, I've been saying this for so many times, we should not wait till 2019 until the free trade agreement with the European Union takes place, where there's zero customs on the cars imported from Europe. I think the Egyptian government, the current Egyptian government under President Sisi and Ibrahim Mahlab, they should go down with the customs within the next 6 months, the maximum, and allow people to import the cars, safe cars with active and passive safety features like electronic stability program with 6 airbags. I'm shocked when I see cars assembled and sold in Egypt without even a headrest, which is totally irresponsible from the car manufacturer.
Let me say that many of us, we have many complaints about many problems in the cars, even if this is a zero car, and no one will respond to us, you know, even though the problem is not ours. So this is the important part.
It is 2 a.m. here in Cairo. I am Ahmed Nader, and these are the latest top stories. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met on Thursday with the visiting congressional delegation currently in Cairo for talks with the Egyptian officials. Al-Sisi started the meeting with the Americans from African origin with a quick review of the incidents which took place in Egypt during the past 3 years, pointing at the roadmap drawn by the national powers on the 3rd of July, expressing the will of the Egyptians. President Sisi also said on Thursday that Egypt has the will and the ability to combat corruption. In a ceremony marking the Golden Jubilee of the Administrative Control Authority, the ACA, the president said that the economic and the educational conditions contributed in creating the phenomenon. The president noted that the current government is working on combating corruption as well. Still with domestic news, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received on Thursday the Minister of Irrigation, Hussein Moghazi, who briefed him with the results of this week's talks in Khartoum among Egypt, Sudan and the Ethiopian irrigation ministers regarding the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam project. The Minister of Irrigation, Hussein Moghazi, said that Egypt is aware of the importance of time as an element in reversing the possible negative effects of the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam on Egypt. The state prosecutor ordered on Thursday the detention of ousted President Mohamed Morsi for 15 days pending investigations over handing over to Qatar documents relevant to the Egyptian national security. Morsi is accused of providing the documents to Qatar via Al Jazeera news network when he was president. In March, Morsi's aide was accused of delivering the documents regarding the army, its armaments and the troops deployment to the chief editor of Al Jazeera and members of the terrorist Brotherhood organization. And Rajab Tayyip Erdogan was sworn in on Thursday as the Turkish first popularly elected president, a position that will be keeping him in the nation's driving seat for at least another 5 years. In his first speech as head of state, Erdogan said that the European Union accession, the democratic reforms and the Kurdish peace process will be the priorities. And these were the latest top stories. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Irresponsible from
Let me
the
say that many
faction.
of us, we have many complaints about many problems in the cars, even if this is a zero car, and no one will respond to us, even though the problem is not ours. So this is the important part, because I believe we are going to be successful only if I'm going to see Egyptian car abroad. So this is the main success for me, because we don't need more cars in the streets right now.
Well, actually, the thing is, we need modern car in the streets, because all the old cars we have right now here, all the traffic jams we have, most of them can be avoided by having modern cars, reliable cars, which would not break down, for example, break down through technical failure or break down through accidents.
Most of these breakdowns are of new cars.
Well, actually, yeah, the thing is, I want to tell you something. A lot of the new cars assembled in Egypt or imported in Egypt, they have old technology, because the car companies and the car dealers, they import the old generation engines and the old generation cars because it's much cheaper for them, so they can have a much bigger profit margin. So in order to fight this, we need a Ministry of Consumer Rights, like it is available on in most of the countries worldwide. We have a Consumer Protection Agency, but I think they're completely overstrained with the many problems we have in all the sectors, including the automotive sector. So first of all, we need a ministry taking care of this and regulating the automotive industry, both the import business as well as the assembly business in Egypt. And after this, we need to put specifications for the imported cars and the assembled cars, meaning I need modern engines which have a low fuel consumption, which have all the active and passive safety features, because one part of the traffic jams we have also comes from the accidents we have, because cars do not have electronic stability programs, so they're it's 80% more likely they get involved in a crash than if they would have the electronic stability program, and nobody is aware of this fact. As a matter of fact, some car companies, they take out the ESP, the electronic stability program, and put instead like 8 airbags. So
because it costs much more to buy a car that has an ESP.
Actually, you will be surprised how much an ESP costs. If you order an ESP anywhere in the world in a car, it only costs you $100 or $150 more.
Is that true?
And the airbag costs the same. So some some car dealers, some Korean car dealers in specific, have a very hideous business plan. Actually, they import some cars with 8 airbags and they take off the ESP. So this means the car, because researchers have shown that a car without ESP is 80% more likely to get involved in a crash. So they want the cars to crash so that they can repair these cars, get more money from the insurance. And if you have 8 airbags, you will make like 40,000.
Sales point of
yeah,
view,
you
yes.
make like 40,000 or 50,000.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned
Egyptian
sales
pounds.
because this is something I want to discuss with you about. Why is it that we always have a problem of after sales here in Egypt? You'd see the company would sell very good, it would focus on selling the car, and then when you want to see their faces again for fixing your car at the service, you get the poorest quality and nobody knows what they're doing, when it's unlikely that you'd always find. And it's so funny because in this field in particular in Egypt, anybody can be called a mechanic. I mean, if he's an 8-year-old kid and he's doing the job for ages, he can open his own little shop and he says, I fix all brands, and God knows what he's doing. And I know people who have worked at huge car agencies here in Egypt, and it's always the after sales that is facing a problem. The service is horrible. Why is that?
This is very easy to explain. First of all, you're absolutely right. We have the worst customer service in the world. We have the most consumer rights in the world. I'll give you a very short example. I have a list with almost 40 or 50 cars worldwide with their service intervals, which you need to do abroad. Most of these, 90% of these cars do their first service after 30,000 kilometers. Here in Egypt, you are forced for the same car to go to the service every 5,000 kilometers. This means that you have to go 6 times more, in some cases even 10 times more, because some cars go for the first service at 50,000 kilometers. This means you pay 6 to 10 times more than the consumer abroad. The parts are functioning perfectly, so they would not need to be changed at all. But here in Egypt, they force you to go every 5,000 kilometers. Otherwise, your warranty would not be applicable anymore. So why do they do this? Because first of all, we have no media to uncover all these corruption among the car companies, because all the media we have, all these weekly automotive supplements or advertising supplements, I call them, they're not only misleading, but they're just working for the benefit of the car manufacturer. They don't care about the readers. You know, it's if you open the car supplements on
Usually,
Friday
yes,
or Sunday,
ads for the
and the problem is that these are a government-backed newspaper like Ahram, Akhbar, and Gumhuriyya, but the Gumhuriyya supplement even stopped a couple of months ago. So what is really astonishing is that these publications, they should actually work for the benefit of the readers and the consumers, and actually they do not. I mean, they're completely misleading, they're stating wrong facts, and they're just benefiting the automotive industry. So this is why you as a consumer, you found yourself you're paying twice for the same service you would have in Germany. You'd pay almost double the price, and you go 5 to 10 times more to the service than it's the case in Germany. And they charge you for something which doesn't need to be changed anyway. For example, the spark plugs, the filters, the air filter, the fuel filter, everything. If the first service should have been by 50,000, why do we change it every 5,000?
Because of pollution.
Sorry?
Because of the pollution, because of the road, and they persuade you. They play
No.
your psychology.
Actually, this is another misleading argument, because many people say you have to come every 5,000 kilometers because the air and the pollution in Egypt is so bad, so you need to do it every 5,000 kilometers. This is nonsense. Actually, the environment in Egypt and the weather in Egypt is the best weather in the world for the car, because we don't have the extreme cold weather and cold temperatures like in Europe, and we do not have the extreme hot temperatures like is the case in the Gulf region, for example, or Saudi Arabia. So this means we have ideal temperature for the oil of the car. So because the viscosity of the oil will not get damaged by the low temperatures or the high temperature. So actually,
also talking about this point, it is very important, because usually all of us, when we start or we want to move on to buy a new car, for example, the most important question is not about the car itself, but after sales services. We usually ask about this, where are we going to go, about the components of the car, and this is also another important thing because
The spare parts prices are enormously high.
Very
Yes.
expensive. So how far can we have also to manufacture our own spare parts here? Is it possible?
Actually, it is possible. It's quite possible. If
Everything is possible.
everything is
but-
possible. You just need to have the will, and you need to be willing to compete internationally. But all the car the suppliers here in Egypt, they never had the intention to compete internationally. They just want to supply their components and their spare parts to the 17 local assembly lines because they know that there's no regulator, there's no government looking after
And we
them,
are
there's
going
no
to pay
consumer
because
right.
we need it.
Sorry?
We are
And
going
you'll
to
have to pay anyway because you have no other options, because you have no media uncovering all this corruption in this sector. Another even easier example is 95 or 92 octane. You know, like 10 or 12 companies here in Egypt, they sell cars which must use 95 octane, and actually they're right on their advertisements and on their TV spots that their car can run safely with 95 octane, which is not true. And this is why there's so many customer complaints with damaged engines and stuff like that. And nobody's taking care of them. I mean, like I said, we need a ministry for consumer rights because the Consumer Protection Agency, I mean, they're trying their best, you know, but it's by far not enough because, first of all, they don't
Not
have...
that much.
It's not that much. And
You have to admit the fact.
well, they're
Not
doing a
only
little...
in cars, but
Sorry?
not only in cars, but in general.
Well, like I said, I mean, they're doing their best, but it's not enough. You know, it's very simple. They're completely overstrained. I can't have a team of 20 or 15 persons and not specialized persons because they don't have specialized experts in all these sectors like food sector or automotive sector. They simply don't have them. And you're asking them to take care of all the complaints of the 95 million Egyptians all over Egypt. This is not realistic. So we need a ministry. We need reliable media, actually, in Egypt, which would fight for the rights of the consumer. And this is not available so far because, like I said, all the radio shows we have currently, or all the TV shows we have, both on the state-owned TV channels and radio channels, as well as on the private channels, they're not looking for the rights of the consumers. They're just looking for the rights for the benefit of the automotive sector, the automotive companies, misleading in most cases the Egyptian consumer, forcing him to buy cars which have no safety features at all, not telling them the truth about 95 octane or 92 octane. And at the end of the day, we, the Egyptian customers, are paying the bill, and the bill is extremely high. So if the Egyptian government and if President Sisi and Prime Minister Ibrahim Mahleb want to improve the sector, they need to get real experts giving them the correct advice for the benefit of the government and the Egyptian consumer. Because, for example, in Algeria, when this French company wanted to establish and to build a factory there, the government forced them that the government will own 51% of this factory. And this is something which we should use as well. If we're trying to develop the Suez Canal area and build some car factories there, we need to make sure that the persons the main persons benefiting from these projects will be the Egyptian consumer as well as the Egyptian government, not necessarily the investor. Same as in China. You cannot build a car factory in China unless you have a Chinese partner, which is in most cases either state-owned or state-backed by China somehow. So we are not going to invent the wheel. We have to see how the other car companies have developed their automotive sector and do the same. And all what happened over the past 30 years, corruption from both the government side as well as from the side of the investors, we need to forget this because you should not deal, the Egyptian government should not deal with any of the old investors which have not been helping the government or the consumer over the past 30 years, and they should really look for new investors with new ideas. So I think this is the only way to really develop this automotive sector, and they should really stop listening to all these fairy tales from all these weird investors from abroad or inside or from the Egyptian investors as well.
Anyway, let's be optimistic for what is coming up at the end. Mr. Mohamed Sheta, a car expert, thank you very much
for joining us. Thank you.
And right now, moving on to a quick break, and we'll be back to resume the breakfast show.
Luxor Temple was known in the ancient text as Ebit Resit or the Southern Harem due to its location south to Karnak Temple. Now, the origin of this temple goes back to the time of the Middle Kingdom, where names